After an offseason full of questions and talent leaving the organization, the Carolina Hurricanes have been off to a scorching start this season, getting incredible production from their top players, from their netminders, but even some depth guys. But it's not just that, Mark. Even with all this amazing stuff happening for Carolina right now, they still have one of the best prospects in the world ready to come over and take this team to another level next season. There is a lot we got to break down about the Carolina Hurricanes coming up on this episode of Hat Trick HQ. But before we get into the video, guys, we got to remind you we're on that push for 5,000 subscribers. That's only 270 subscribers away. So if you're part of what I think 70% of people who are not subscribed to this channel and are watching and you like what you're seeing, we got all NHL content every single day. So hit the button down below. It's completely free. Mark, we got to talk about the Hurricanes this season. They have been a story that I feel like has flown under the radar, but the production they're getting from their players, the wins they've been able to put together as well, has been very, very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the Carolina Hurricanes scoring, we're going through a list of a lot of guys. I mean, you're looking at a guy like who led the team last season being second on scoring. You can pause, you can work your way down this. There are a couple new faces on this list, and Josh, just looking at daily faceoffs, I believe this was the lines from last game at the ending of it. Is there anyone on this list that's kind of coming out and shocking you to start this season?
Well, I mean, like, there's a lot of guys, right? I mean, first of all, Seth Jarvis in the third line. Like, I know he gets that production of a higher guy, but that's the thing with Carolina. They're able to play guys kind of all over the lineup right now, and they're getting production. It's working. A guy like Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who he was, people were talking about buying him out last year. The last, what, 6 years of his contract or something? Last season, he did not live up to expectations at all of this massive contract, but this year so far, he has looked very productive. He has looked really good playing next to a guy like Martin Necas, and he's been working his way up the lineup for sure, up from the fourth and third line last year up to the second this year. Eric Robinson's a bit of a surprise, and they still have Jesper, who's not coming in, but if you pop that lineup up one more time, one of the guys that I wanted to shout out who is a bit lower in the lineup, look, we all know Svechnikov and Aho are great. We all know Necas is having the best season of his career so far. But the fourth line is really interesting. I mean, William Carrier, Jack Drury, really two solid fourth liners. But Jackson Blake, he is such a young player, but he has looked very mature for this Carolina team so far. And honestly, Mark, I have not seen anyone talk about the guy from North Dakota, Jackson Blake, outside of dedicated Hurricanes fans. He has 4 points in 8 games as mostly a fourth liner. He's had a lot of chemistry with William Carrier, but I think for him, the biggest thing for me is how mature his game looks. And yeah, he's a little smaller, like a lot of Canes prospects, like 5'10", 5'11", 170, 180 pounds. It's below the average size for a wing, but he's looked really good, and I feel like no one speaks about him at all.
And the biggest thing with him too is this was a late draft pick, 109th overall. I know it's not a seventh round pick, but getting a guy that can produce in the NHL 4 points on the fourth line in 8 games, being 2 goals, 2 assists. This is a lot of coming out from a guy that can play on your fourth line, that can move up the lineup. And like you said, he's only 21 years old, 109th overall pick. He's really going over his expectations. I do want to talk about William Carrier as well. I thought he was awesome on the Vegas Golden Knights. Him coming in, producing what they need out of a fourth line guy, a guy that can hit. And believe it or not, when he did play in the juniors, he was actually a bit of a goal scorer. So having a guy that can be a goal scorer, and I'm not saying he's going to score 40 goals, but a guy that can pot you a couple goals, be physical, and kill some penalties, having Carrier down there is awesome. And like you said, Kotkaniemi has been outstanding. Jordan Stahl is still looking great at age, what is it?
Somehow.
30 something at this point. But
Yeah.
having this team, having the talent, the young guys, the veterans, everything in between, things are looking good for a team that looked like losing Jake Guentzel might have been the biggest loss of the offseason, but they filled it out with depth. They filled it out with more pieces. And Josh, it's not even really done there yet. I mean, when you're looking at this, they were on a massive win streak. You look at their West or just the road trip in general, you can see all the wins they've racked together. The game in Florida was postponed in Tampa Bay, but all these games, wins against New Jersey, Pittsburgh, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, these wins are big wins to get early on in the season, especially with a team trying to get some chemistry going. But when you do look at it, I do want to give some flowers to the defense as well. And just looking at this, who has really stood out to you with the defensive core?
Shane Gostisbehere is the number one guy that comes to mind, right? Like, I mean, losing a guy like Brady Skjei is never easy as well, especially considering the offensive production that he put up last year, having, what, 13 goals, I think, last season? Shane Gostisbehere has come in and been one of their top point getters this season as a defenseman. So he only got this year left on his contract at 3.2 million, but he's been one of those guys, and while, he does occasionally give some stuff back on the defensive end, his offensive game has been his bread and butter, whether it's with what, I think it was with Detroit, right? And then Arizona before that when they were still there. So Gostisbehere Ghost has been really surprising for me. And, I think this is actually a really good transition to move into what we're talking about. You know what? No, I'll wait on that. I'll wait to talk about the KHL prospects because they got to get to their goalies first. But keep that in mind. Keep that offensive production in mind. I will say their defense has been better than I thought, Mark, because coming into this season, like, I know we're all so worried. They lost not only Guentzel, they also lost Teravainen up front, but they lose a guy like Brady Skjei, and you're like, what's going to happen? I mean, Jalen Chatfield looks like he'll be good for the future, but Gostisbehere, and I know you like Sean Walker as well, I think that's been an underrated second pairing in terms of the league-wide landscape of defense, but they're really holding their own there, and I don't think a lot of people expected it.
And the biggest thing is, and I'll say it, I think Carolina has by far the best defensive core in the NHL. Yes, you have a guy like Brent Burns getting a little older, but Sean Walker coming in was an awesome pickup. You have a guy like Dmitry Orlov playing third line minutes. Slavin's been awesome. Ghost has been great. But the biggest thing with this is, and let's not wait, let's talk about the prospects.
Let's just go. Let's just go.
I'm going to give you the reign on it, and you can go.
Alexander Nikishin. So, if you guys didn't know, I am a Habs fan, of course. So I've been keeping track of St. Petersburg SKA because our boy Ivan Demidov is over there. But another guy on ESPN's recent top prospects outside the NHL list, well, it featured Ivan Demidov at number 1, and it featured Alexander Nikishin at number 3. And if we look at his size, we look at his production in the KHL, that ESPN article ranked him as the best defenseman in the KHL. He has 14 points, 5 goals in 18 games. His last 2 seasons, 56 and 55 points apiece. This guy's 23, he's 6'4", and not only does he produce on the offensive end, not only does he have a bit of physicality to his game, he is a solid defender as well. So when we look at the landscape of Carolina's defense, they have the best defensive prospect outside the NHL, in my opinion. ESPN ranks Levshunov higher. I mean, I get it. He's a lot younger, but Nikishin straight up is probably the best defenseman in Russia right now. So for him to come over to the NHL, he projects to be a future top pairing guy. And I like we were talking about before the show, he's going to come in and replace Shane Gostisbehere without any worries at all right on that second pairing. And who knows, maybe he'll end up getting some top pairing minutes too. But Mark, I'm so excited for Nikishin because he's just one of those guys that, again, sort of popped out of nowhere like a year or two after he was drafted. You're like, holy crap, wait a minute, this guy's putting up 50 points in the KHL as a defenseman, and then he did it again, and now he's on pace to do it again. This guy's unreal.
And the biggest thing is he's a bit of a unicorn, and like you said yourself, third round pick, 69th overall, nice. But when you look at a guy that can put up points, score goals, 17 goals last season at 6'4", he's going to come in and fill out perfectly on that second pairing. Maybe he comes in and steals the show. With the defensive pairings being so good, we were kind of talking about it as well. The Carolina Hurricanes do have, I believe it was the 7th best penalty kill. Bringing in a guy that's 6'4", can play both ends of the ice, scoring goals, setting up assists, laying the body, anything in between. Putting him on this team is just going to make this team even better defensively and be able to produce. Josh, bit of a hot take. Do you think he can maybe slide into a power play immediately coming over?
I think it's possible. That's one thing I'm not super familiar with when it comes to the Hurricane special teams, but I mean, it's a power play that's fringe top 10 in the league right now. But that's the thing. This guy, Nikishin, has that offensive potential. I see a world where you give him that opportunity if there's even a spot that's debatably available. I mean, it depends how, I guess, Brent Burns, I assume he's on their first power play. I don't actually know. So that's where my knowledge of the Hurricanes kind of ends. But I don't even know if it's a hot take. I think a lot of Hurricanes fans would say, let's just give him the reins and see what he can do because this guy's already proven himself at the NHL level. But maybe to go into the final thing in this video, you talked about how they're going to bolster their offense and defense, but their D-core already looks so good for so many years. That D-core being as good as it is, and their forwards also being solid defensively and having some nice physical players as well, that really bodes well for their goaltending. And I wanted to end this video off by talking about that. And we'll start with Pyotr Kochetkov, who, his save percentage maybe doesn't blow you out of the water this year, but he has looked really good, especially in that last game against Vancouver, minus his diving poke check that absolutely did not work. He has looked really, really good for this team. And while Freddie Anderson has been better, I know you have a lot more thoughts on Freddie Anderson. Kochetkov has looked like a guy that could take over that number 1 role, especially since Anderson can't seem to stay healthy. His contract's going to end at some point. Kochetkov could be this goalie of the future right now, and having this tandem, I don't think it's crazy to say that this is also, when healthy, one of the best tandems in the entire league.
Listen, Hurricanes fans, I feel for you. I'm a Leafs fan and a Canucks fan, so didn't like last game too much. But watching Freddie Anderson, steady Freddie, is one of the best feelings when he can stay healthy. And I do agree, maybe he loses the starting spot, but looking at Freddie Anderson from the past few seasons, I mean, specifically this season with the 940 save percentage or whatever it is, Freddie Anderson is elite when he can stay healthy, and that's always been his biggest downfall. I do think Freddie Anderson does stay the starting goaltender if healthy going into the playoffs, but looking at this team as a whole, the forwards, even after losing players, the defense, even after losing players, they still have the goaltending, they still have the elite coaching, they have everything in between. This team looks primed to make a Stanley Cup run, and Josh, do you think maybe they can make the finals if everything does fall into place?
Absolutely. Last season, don't forget they were third in the NHL. Now, again, I know they lost a lot of talent, and there are probably going to be more games this year that they will lose due to probably lack of depth scoring. Maybe this is not sustainable, but that's the thing. It's a lot of probably and maybes. Straight up, the product they put on the ice so far this season has been incredibly impressive. I see a world where it happens. I wouldn't say they're a favorite to make the finals, but I think people are sleeping on them a little too much just because of the biases coming in from the offseason. But they have, in my opinion, at least exceeded my expectations, and I expect them to continue to do that for at least a little while longer.
And listen, trade deadline is going to come up faster than we expect. They can go out and get another big piece like Jake Guentzel. They're going to make this team deeper. They still have prospects come over. Carolina fans, you guys have a great team to look forward to today, tomorrow, and in the future. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. We'll be back with another video. And like I said, subscribe so you can keep up to date on that as well. But I've been your host, Mark, and my co-host, Josh. Take care.